Good morning, everybody. Sunday school normally starts at 10:30, so since it's 10:36, I figured we'd go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming. Dylan and Greg are going to be handing out some books. It doesn't really matter which one you get. Yeah, I would like them back, though, so please don't leave with them. Now you're thinking, crud, why did I come to this Sunday school class if he's going to be handing out a bunch of books? Because this week, we're not actually going to look at any misused verses. Okay, and you're thinking, wow, I've been gypped. This is great. But we're going to look at the tools used in diving deeper into biblical research. So what does it have to do with dealing with misused verses? It's not enough to tell you that it's misused. But I want you to know why or how it's been misused, as well as give you the ability to figure out what is the correct use of a verse. And then we also can figure out how the misuse came about. So this week we're going to look at all the tools, and we're going to look at a couple of words, and we're going to start using the tools. Then in the second class, we're going to look at the dangers, the pitfalls of these tools. So you're thinking, you're teaching me tools, and then you're going to tell me how they're dangerous. Why are you teaching me the tools at all, right? There's a reason. Along with all these tools, we're going to, in the second week, we're then going to start applying these tools to the verses. So from what we talk about in these first 2 weeks, we're going to move into the rest of the class in looking at various passages that are misused frequently. And we're also going to analyze what category of mistake and then figure out, using the tools we have, how to correct that mistake. So it's not enough to say, that's not what this verse means. We got to figure out why and what does it actually mean. So that means that after these first 2 weeks especially, this class is going to be a little bit more discussion-based, more interactive in nature. So if half of you leave in the third week, I'll understand why. It's okay. Before we really get into the tools, though, let me pray and open it up. Father, I thank you for your love to us, Lord, that you give us grace, Lord, and that we should weep and mourn over our sin, Lord, but we can also rejoice as we humble ourselves, Lord, because you do exalt us, Lord. That we're not exalted because of any means of our own, but by your blood. We thank you for that. Pray that our time together would be productive and that we would not be merely puffed up in knowledge, Lord, but seek to love you and serve you in truth and in spirit. So it's in your name I pray. Amen. All right, so the tools we're going to be using, first is the Bible dictionaries. Who here got one of my dictionaries? Some of them have really long names, but if you got something that says dictionary on it, I think I saw a hand over here. You've got a dictionary. There's another. Dylan has a dictionary. I think there are maybe 3. Maybe Vine's Concordance is also a dictionary. That's a lexicon. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, so the dictionaries we're going to use, primarily, what do you use a dictionary for?
Define words.
To define words, look at meaning. So if I'm not sure what a particular word means, instead of just being like, yeah, I know what that word means, it'll work out, I'm actually going to go to the Bible dictionary and I'm going to look it up. And sometimes we'll even use a regular dictionary. That a little bit more sparingly, though. We've got Mounces, which is over there. Vines. Logos is what I'm using. It's this online program that I have that contains thousands of resources, and it's great. So if you don't have a book, don't worry. I've got most of it up here also. We're also going to use word studies. Does anybody have a word study? I think I handed one of those out, maybe. Yeah, you've got a word study. I actually went ahead and did you a favor, and I put a Post-it. Yeah, so there we go. So we're generally going to use these word studies when the dictionary definition was vague. So it says happy, and then you look up happy, and it says to not be sad. And you're going to be like, okay, great, what does that mean? Right? So that's how we're going to use word studies. Or if you need to dive a little bit deeper in your particular understanding of like a whole phrase or one particular word. It's also helpful when we have similar words to compare. Again, I'm going to use Logos a lot on this one, but there are some other good word studies. Sometimes also, the word study books do not have a word study on the words we're looking for, so we'll have to do our own. And that's where the lexicons come in. I think, Taylor, you had my big lexicon. And then there's some other lexicons over there. You've got one too. Those are the most complicated ones that there are. This is a part of doing your own word study, though, and it's a great way to dive deeper into a text to gain a better understanding of the different ways a particular word can and has been used. There are several difficulties with lexicons. The first is that the best ones were written by Germans, which means German resources and phrases are sometimes used, and you're like, okay, great, I don't speak German. Does anybody in here speak German? All right, you've got the German one, so that's perfect. The second is that they regularly use Greek, Hebrew, and even Latin. So unless you can read Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, you're going to have difficulty. The third difficulty with lexicons is the vast amount of information, along with an extensive use of abbreviations. They've got 3 full pages in that book just explaining the abbreviations they're going to be using in their book. So it can be difficult to use them. We're going to be using BDAG. It's just B-D-A-G in class. That's the one Taylor has. It's just a short way of saying their 4 German names: Bauer, Dinker, Arnsk, Gingrich, right? So if I say BDAG, that's what I'm talking about. Commentaries. Who here has a commentary or something that talks about commentaries? I think I handed only out 2 of those. Yeah. So commentaries are going to largely be used after you've read the text yourself. Made your own observations and asked your own questions. Okay, so you shouldn't just jump straight to a commentary and be like, oh, what does MacArthur believe on Titus chapter 1? Read it. Dive into the text first. It can be a good shortcut past word studies and lexicons, though, if you don't read Greek and Hebrew. Or if you're looking for a quick answer, you're just like, okay, I'm in my 15-minute devotional in the morning, and I just want to know, what is this text talking about? They're also often good for providing literary and historical context for us. Okay, I just dumped a lot of information. Does anybody have any quick preliminary questions on those resources? No, perfect. All right, so putting the tools to use. Dictionaries. One of my dictionary people, in Titus chapter 1, verse 7, it reads, "For the overseer must be above reproach as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, and not fond of sordid gain." Pugnacious, right? I spoke on this it's been a few months ago. Pugnacious. Who here has even ever used the word pugnacious in a sentence? Like an everyday sentence, not reading Titus chapter 1, verse 7. So, can I have my dictionary people look up the word pugnacious? And while they're doing that, I'm going to tell them that this is an exercise in futility. You're not going to find the word pugnacious. Right? So you're turning there and you're thinking, oh man, why is everybody staring at me? It's not there. So I tricked you a little bit. But one word I do want you to look up, overseer. Can you find overseer? The dictionary is not going to be as helpful on this one because overseer. Somebody give me the definition of overseer that doesn't have the dictionary.
The oversee.
Yeah, somebody who oversees.
You can't use the word in a definition.
Yeah, you're right. But somebody who looks after something, right? You've got that idea of, okay, they look over it. They oversee. Is that what the dictionary tells us?
It says literally, it's 2 root words, epe plus skopos, literally refer to someone who looks over or watches over a group of people.
Yeah. Pretty self-explanatory though, right? But it's helpful to affirm that, yes, I'm not just making this up. Somebody smarter than me agrees with me, right? Overseer. What about Titus chapter 2, verse 12? We have instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age. 3 words: sensibly, righteously, and godly. What's the difference? Yeah, it's tough. So, sensibly. Dylan, can you look up sensibly? What's your name?
James.
James, can you look up righteously? So while they're looking those up, I'm going to tell you ahead of time, we might need to dive a little bit deeper into this one if we really want to understand the difference. Because even as they're giving their definitions, they're going to sound not all that far off. So we'll need to dive a little bit deeper, but it's good to get a definition. Pugnacious. Yeah, we're going to come back to that. Yeah, pugnacious. What does it mean? And how do we figure it out? Because I could go to a dictionary, like just some random dictionary online, and it's going to give me an answer, but is that what it means in Scripture? And if I don't answer that question later, remind me again. You got sensibly, Dylan? It might not be in there. That one's an older one.
Yeah, I can't seem to find it.
Okay, James, have you got righteously?
Well, I don't
Or
know
righteous?
righteously. I
Yeah.
have righteous and
Yeah.
righteousness.
Uh-huh.
It's a noun, usually rendered righteousness, justice, rightness. Generally describes the state or quality of that which accords with some recognized standard. Not always expressed. It can be God's law or natural law or some other assumed standard.
Yeah.
And then it says righteousness is first and foremost a quality ascribed to God.
Yeah. So it gives us a definition, but are you still left kind of wondering, okay, how does that differ between sensibly and godly? Because especially if it's the characteristic of God, then you're thinking, okay, wasn't righteously godly? So we're going to go a little bit deeper. And for this, we're going to use our word studies in our words. So in order to find them in the word studies, though, I am blanking on your name. Linda. What do I have there on the Post-it?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is the trouble with word studies.
A whole page.
And what language is it in? Largely.
In English
Yeah.
with some else.
Yeah, something else, right? So I want to clarify here. I'm not giving you these Greek and Hebrew tools to say, oh, wow, I know Greek and Hebrew, and you don't. It's tough. I can read some Greek and Hebrew, and I still am like, okay, I need to kind of sound that word out, and I got to figure that out, and I'm still just looking at the English most of the time anyway, right? So what do? Titus chapter 2, verse 12. We've got several words here. Let's see what I've got pulled up here. Okay, this is on overseer. We're going to look at that in just a second. So, sensibly, righteously, godly. What is the difference? Still not going to find it all that well in a word study. We're going to save that one for a commentary here in a little bit. Okay, but I want you to get the sense of, it's easy to make mistakes, because I could just get up here and I could say, this is what it means, trust me and go no further, right? And that's how mistakes get made a lot of the time. I'm saying, yeah, these people don't know how to read these. They'll be all right. They'll believe me. And I can say whatever I want to, right? That's a danger of these tools, and we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But what about Titus chapter 1, verse 5, a more hot topic conversation in biblical circles? Titus chapter 1, verse 5, for this reason I left you in Crete, that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders in every city as I directed you. I'm going to continue on. Namely, if any man is above reproach, the husband of one wife, having children who believe, not accused of dissipation or rebellion, for the overseer must be above reproach as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, and not fond of sordid gain. Elder, how is that different from overseer? Is it different from overseer? What are some other ways the word is translated? Well, here's a little bit of a word study here on the word for overseer. It's episkopos in the Greek. That's what that word says, which I guess it also says in English right here. It gives you a quick definition there. Overseer, bishop, hitting the mark. Those are different ways that it's translated. It even gives you a link to Bedag here, which we'll look at in a second. This tells you the different ways it's translated. Most of the time, overseer or overseers, and like one time, guardian. So there's some variation in how it's translated sometimes. What about, what does it say in Bedag here? So you see all of the abbreviations. It's difficult. You got to kind of sort through. Here's where it actually tells us. One who watches over a guardian. So you got to scan over a lot of this to be able to find that it says one who watches over a guardian. And then what about elder here? Oh, that's pugnacious. There we go. Pugnacious person. A bully. All right, I thought I had elder pulled up here. I do not. That is okay. So I'm going to pull it up here. Give me 1 second. Thank you for your patience. There we go. So we've got the word study here. An elder or a leader, a Christian elder, one who is older. It can also mean a forefather, someone older, or it can refer to that official position. Okay. So we've got that. It's kind of just a quick word study. I want to know, is there a difference? What is the difference? But if I want to dive deeper than that, if I want to figure out what is the actual difference between elder and overseer, I want to look it up in the lexicon. And here, in one of these, I'm going to be thinking about what are some other places that elder is used. Right? So elder is not used in a very famous passage in 1 Timothy chapter 3, but overseer is. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 2, Paul's giving Timothy a list of qualifications for this office of overseer. It is a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires to the office of overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, prudent, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine or pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money, etc., etc., etc. A long list of qualifications that match pretty well Titus chapter 1. So we're looking into this and we're going, okay, great. It's the same word as in Titus chapter 1, verse 7. But what are the broad uses for this term? So presbyteros, this is the elder. This is in the lexicon. So we're using the lexicon to go just a little bit deeper. It tells me that the first definition is an individual person older of 2. So I am the elder over my wife Karina because I am 3 months older than she is. Right? That's just a simple way of using it. And then the editors here will give you a whole list of places that it's used in Greek antiquity. So things I've never even heard of, but they're ancient Greek manuscripts, right? You've got the Testament of Job is an old text, Joseph and Asenath, Justin, right? So you've got all of these texts, and then we've also got it in Luke 15:25. Now the older son was in the field. Right, so you've got uses where it is older. It can also be in a period of time when it's talking about that elder. I don't think that's what he's talking about, though, when he talks about the elder must be. Again, ancient texts where it's just the elder times, right? But here's where we're coming to, an official, the elder or the presbyter. Among the Jews it was used, right? So I'm seeing that they used it as an official office, kind of like a senator in the Latin. It's often translated the same. For members of a group in the Sanhedrin, and among the Christians, for their use of the word as a title, it's not only the Jewish custom, but also in connection with the old ones, the ones who are in charge. We get the word priest, comes from presbyteros. Presbyterian churches use that word. So basically, he's telling me that this is an office, an official office. It's not just a descriptive word in Christian circles. So then we go, okay, he doesn't use the term elder in 1 Timothy. He uses the term overseer. So he also uses the term deacon in chapter 3, verse 8 of 1 Timothy. Right? So we've got churches who don't have elders, they have deacons. So why? What's the difference? Well, deacon is used like this. One who serves as an intermediary in a transaction. One who gets something done at the behest of a superior. They're assistants, they're servants. Let's see. So those are the two major translations of these words. Two ways they're used throughout all of history. The Greek word here. Right? So you've got this. Deacon is always somebody who's serving a superior. And you've also got elder, which is the one in charge. So we go to 1 Timothy chapter 3, where we've got this distinction where he uses the word elder, or he doesn't use the word elder, but he uses the word overseer, and he uses the word deacon. And so a lot of people go, oh, they're the same thing. We don't need to have elders. We have deacons. It's okay. So we look at the lexicon and it tells us, okay, they're not the same thing, or else he would have written the same thing. We also have connecting words like likewise, right here. Likewise. So you've got this list of things for elders or overseers, and in the same way, deacons. Likewise, this connecting word. So what does that mean? You're thinking, why do I care what likewise means? Because it's going to show a difference between Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 3. This is the word for likewise, a marker of similarity that approximates identity in the same way, or similarly, likewise. You don't use that word when it's the same thing. Notice in Titus chapter 1, he uses the qualifications for elder, and he just switches from elder, in every city as I directed you, for the overseer must be above reproach. He doesn't say the elder is supposed to be this, you're supposed to set them up, and also the overseers are supposed to be like this. That's what he does in 1 Timothy. So you've got this transitional word. And I'm not just making this up. I've looked it up and I've seen, okay, he uses this transitional word that doesn't mean these same people. It means in the same way or likewise, similarly, deacons are supposed to be this. Not to mention he gives another list. And if he has just given a list on what they're supposed to do, if they're the same thing, he's not going to give the list again. All right, so we just kind of trudged through that. David.
Does it make a difference whether you use the King James, New King James, New American Standard? Because they all got a different meaning. You know, if you look it up like in Strong Concordance.
Absolutely.
Dictionary,
Yeah.
so that's more confusing than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's important. These dictionaries, they're not in the New American Standard. It's not the English they're using. That's why you couldn't find the word pugnacious, which I'm going to pull up here. Because the translation you're using is going to matter, especially if you're using a dictionary. If you're going into the Greek or the Hebrew, which you might not, but a lot of easy Bible resources will tell you this is what the English is and this is the Greek right under it. You can find them online. And I'll tell you about those in just a second. And it'll tell you this is what the Greek word is. You can click on it. You don't have to even read Greek. You can just click on it and it will take you to something kind of like this. So if it's in the Greek, it's going to be the same depending on if it's King James in the English or New American Standard or ESV or the NIV. Not the Message, because I'm not sure they actually follow the Bible. But you've got this kind of thing. Yeah, James.
So in the dictionary, Mountain Dictionary, overseer and bishop is the same thing, basically.
Yeah.
Because they use the same Greek episkopos.
Yeah.
So overseer and bishop, same thing. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you're going to see that overseer and elder are used synonymously in Titus chapter 1, but overseer and deacon are not used synonymously. You have that term likewise. They're used similarly, but they're not synonymous. They're similar roles. So for all of you, pugnacious, right here. Quick, easy way to look it up. I didn't even need to know the Greek word, which is plektes, or plektu, or plekta, right? So it depends on where it's at. Doesn't really matter, right? I don't need to be able to read Greek to be able to read this right here. It means pugnacious person, a bully. It's in a list of qualities relating to a superintendent or an elder or an overseer. So when I can't figure it out because I'm not using the right translation with my dictionary, it makes sense to go to the original or to look it up in whatever my dictionary is using as their English translation. Are there any questions on that so far? No? Okay, perfect. So now you're thinking, I am never going to dive that deep, right? You're thinking, I do not want to do this. This is not for me. This is why you're going to school, Jordan, and this is why we go to listen to Pastor Gary. You're right. Yeah, it's in the bulletin. It's been there for weeks, right? A lot of the time, we're just not going to dive that deep, and that's why commentaries are fantastic, right? I wanted to get into a bit of this, though, before we look at misunderstood verses, so that you have a taste of what it's like to dive deep. So the people who make these common mistakes have not even barely dived deep. Some of them have never even read the verse that they're claiming to have told you, right? They're not saying, they don't know what don't judge. The Bible says don't judge, right? We're going to talk about that one. They don't know what verse that is. They don't even know for sure that it's in the Bible, right? So they've definitely not dived this deep. And those are the least dangerous ones. The dangerous ones are the ones who know these things and yet choose not to do them and not to do them right and still mislead. In fact, they are told in the Bible that they are going to have a stricter judgment on them even than if they had not known the gospel. Right? So here we have the tools so that we can understand what it's like to dive deep. Most of the time, we're not going to take an hour of our personal time, though, to dive headlong into a passage over one word or anything like that. It can be done, though. You and I are going to go to commentaries. And again, I want to stress this. If you're going to use a commentary only, you're not going to do anything else like this. It's important that you have a trusted and trustworthy commentary. Right, so my two commentary people in here, you don't actually even have a commentary. You have it's basically a commentary on commentaries. Okay, so I think one of you has Carson and one of you has Roscup as the author, right? Two guys I trust pretty well. Pastor Gary recommended them, so I said, okay, they must be okay. They go over commentary surveys. This just tells you, if I'm reading in Titus chapter 1, it's going to tell me what are probably the best commentaries for Titus chapter 1. Then you can look in our library at church and we probably have the top 3. Right, so a lot of times what I'll do with these two is I'll look at both of them if I'm studying something. And I'll typically look at the first few that they have that are in common. Right, because I want to figure out what are really the best ones. So also some other good commentaries, the MacArthur commentary series. The MacArthur and Ryrie study Bibles are also really good. Those are my quick ones. If I'm doing my Bible devotion in the morning, I'm just going to look it up quickly in MacArthur's Bible study. Or, what's it called? Study Bible. Thank you. Mixed up the words. Study Bible. And it's just that's going to be what I do that morning. I don't need to go deep for a morning devo. Sermons can also function as a kind of auditory commentary, right? So I want to know more about Titus chapter 1. I'm going to look up, see if I've got some good sermons on Titus chapter 1. I might even look up some bad sermons on Titus chapter 1 just to see what are some of the common lies that are told. You know, what is the prosperity gospel saying about Titus chapter 1? What are people who don't believe you should have elders saying about this? You know, so I'm aware of what's going on. So some commentaries are going to be a lot more technical than other commentaries. Does anybody have a book that I have not brought up yet that you're just holding and you're like, why do I have this? I'm not sure if I actually brought it this morning. No, okay, but the word studies one that Linda has is also kind of a commentary. So it's going to function way too complicated and way too technical. It's going to tell you what verb tense it is in the Greek for that word in that passage, and you're just going to say, okay, what does it mean that it's in the second aorist, third person, present active? You know, what? Why do I need to know that? You don't, right? Not really. But it can help, and it can help you give a solid grasp. You don't need to have Greek or Hebrew. There are good commentaries that you can go to look at. Any questions on what we've covered so far this week? Awesome. And I thought I took the battery out of this clock, and it is still ticking, and it's driving me insane. Okay. So have I answered any questions I promised to answer? Okay, so next week, and by the way, we're going to end each class a little bit early because this class is doing hymns, and in the last minutes of their class, they're going to be singing a hymn with the piano going. So if I try to teach through that, it's not going to work. And I'm not going to lead you in song because nobody wants that. It will be a joyful noise, and that's about it. Okay, but so when I finish early, don't be thinking, oh, great, Jordan gypped me of my Sunday school class time. It's on purpose, okay? So next week, we're going to look at the pitfalls. What are the dangers of each tool? You're not going to find a lot of dangers in the dictionary, but the deeper you go, the more dangerous it can get for you. Okay, and we're going to look at why.
Jordan?
Yes?
Are you going to go over the online stuff that you're using?
Yes.
Software?
Thank you.
Is that this week or next week?
So this is Logos. This one you have to pay for, and it's kind of expensive. But let me see if I can pull it up. There's my Greek, or my Hebrew verbal systems. Don't read my emails. All right. Bible Hub is one I used before I had Logos. Let me see if I can make it a little bit larger for you. All right, so I want to look up in a lexicon here. See, you've got all these resources. This one is good for if, okay, I don't know the Greek and the Hebrew, and I just want to kind of look, right? So I'm wanting to follow easy steps. So I go to Titus chapter 1. Takes me to Titus chapter 1. I've got verses in different translations right here, so I can see what the different translations translated as. I'm going to go to verse 7 so that we can actually see. We got overseer, a church leader in the New Living Translation. Overseer, 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 bishop in the King James. All right, so I've got all of that. All right, so if I want to go a little bit deeper, I'm going to go to the Greek here. All right, and so you'll see that it's got the Greek here. It's got even the English pronunciation. And then an English translation. The overseer. So I'm going to click this. And it's going to take me to Strong's Concordance. It's going to give me some word studies that are available here. These aren't always the best resources, but it's a start, right? And I didn't need to know any Greek or Hebrew to click on that. And it'll tell me basic definitions and usage. So Bible Hub is a great one for that. Thank you for bringing that up, reminding me. Any questions on that? No, great. Okay, I'm going to leave that up in case you're curious, right? So you can go there. I definitely recommend that. It took me 2 minutes right here. If I'm doing it, you'll be great too. So next week, we're going to look at the dangers of each tool. We're also going to look at the categories of mistakes. So I've broken it up into 3 basic categories, and we're going to look at those. And then we're also going to look at our first passage next week. So come prepared to discuss it with me and tell me ways that you've heard this passage used, and I guarantee you, all of you next week will have heard this passage misused. So I'm sure examples will pop right into your mind. Okay, with that, are there any last questions before I be quiet so they can sing their song in a little bit? No? Perfect. Let me pray, and then you guys are dismissed to either go over there and sing hymns with them once they're singing hymn, or hang out here and chat. Father, I thank you for your word, Lord, that there is such a treasure trove of knowledge to be had in your word, Lord, that we can always go deeper, and we can always study more. And Lord, help us not to just study your word, Lord, but to apply it to our lives, Lord, so that we might live in a way that is pleasing to you, Lord, and humble ourselves, Lord. Lord, help us to not look down on those who misuse the verses, Lord, but to rather understand that such were we once, Lord, all dead in our sins and our trespasses. So, Lord, I thank you for your grace and your mercy to us, Lord, that only by your grace and mercy do we have eyes that can see truth in your word. Lord, I pray if there is any here that does not know you, Lord, that they would have their eyes opened to your glory. It's in your name I pray. Amen.